Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News. UNN is the official news channel for CARE, which stands for the Center for Amity and Restoration of Earth. And we are here to give you what we call the real news, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. So people talking and they think they know the truth, but they really don't know the truth. And then you have disinformation out there from sources that are specifically trying to mislead the public. And that's very confusing for most of humanity, who's just trying to make sense of what in the world is happening on this planet right now, because nothing makes sense. I don't know if you've noticed this. Nothing is making sense. So what is really happening behind the scenes? And we have a newscast that's released through our online distribution platform, which is our website. You can find us at unitednetwork.earth. Our newscast comes out every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And what I try to do with the rundown is to give you a week in review. So what are some of the top stories that we talked about this last week? This is a great thing to check out if you have missed a newscast, because our newscasts can be pretty long. I know you guys have lives outside of UNN, or perhaps you want to share UNN with someone else and give them a heads up on what's happening in the world, because more and more people are waking up, more people are asking questions, and we hope to be that source for them to help make sense of this giant puzzle that we're all trying to put together. And we do that in various ways. We have local stories that are told through the eyes of our field messengers. These are people that just want to tell the truth about what's going on in their community. They don't necessarily have any experience in reporting, let's say, but they love where they live. And the more we hear these kind of stories from people boots on the ground, so to speak, the more things start to make sense, the more we understand each other, and all the agendas and things like that start to melt away, and we really start talking to one another again. So we love our field messengers. We also have a portion of the news called the New Earth, and this is where our planet is going. This talks about everything from the amazing things that other humans are doing on this planet that never gets reported, to physical changes in your body, to your amazing superhuman abilities, which I love talking about, and just where we're going. Where are we going, and how can you help us in that way? Maybe you get some ideas from this segment on things you can do in your own community to make this place better, because we always say this is up to you. Don't wait for some savior, some white hat, some whatever, to come save you. This is up to you, and we hope to encourage you through the New Earth stories. We also talk about regional stories that are specifically impacting the people. We don't care what governments have to say unless they're doing something that specifically impacts you. But if this is this head of state talking to this head of state, we don't care, because they're all puppets. We also have something called the World Situation Report, and this is the real behind the scenes of the deals, the operatives, the deep state, the real deep state, not the deep state that Trump talks about or mainstream media talks about, because that's not the deep state. You never heard the names of the real deep state, but there is a group of people and even different factions that are kind of fighting against each other, and it helps to give a perspective, an understanding of what's happening behind the scenes, because right now everyone's really vying for control over planet Earth. Now, what they don't understand is we are now in a golden age, and you are a sovereign being. You don't need anybody to control you. It is between you, God's source, the universe, and that's where we're going. So we don't need a nanny state anymore. We don't need anyone siphoning our energy, our money, our everything. So this is a whole new world, and we hope to shed light on that through our newscast. So you may be asking, how do you have this information? Well, we have access to the highest security clearance on this planet. This goes far beyond governments. If you've heard of terms like the SSP, it's above the SSP, the Secret Space Program. And we have access to this through, it used to be called the Alpha System. It has now been changed to the Light System, and we can see what's going on. It's an incredible system. It's an etheric system. So think quantum, but real quantum, not white hat quantum. And some of the information that we share is going to be surprising. You may have never heard of some of this stuff before, and that's okay. I encourage you, if this is your first time checking us out, or maybe second or third time, and you're still trying to get your bearings, it's all good. I encourage you to stick with us. Always think critically, forget about the surface level stuff. If someone is telling you something, don't just read the headlines, ask questions, because that's when you really start to put two and two together. I always say news is no longer a spectator sport. I don't ever want you guys to go away from, listening to UNN and just assume that everything, is true. We are giving you the truth, but I encourage you guys to be active in understanding that truth, understanding the story behind that truth, and doing your own research. Okay, so let's talk about what's coming up in today's episode. We have our field messenger reports from Spain, the United States, and Romania. I'll tell you more about that in just a bit. In New Earth, we're talking about ways we can spread kindness to others, why we don't have more regenerative farming producers out there, which is an incredible way to grow our food and maintain livestock. We're also going to talk about what to do when that guidance from Source God, the Creator, seems to stop. And we've all had those moments where we're feeling really good, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait, I need guidance. What's going on? And you don't seem to get it. In our regional stories are stories from around the world, and we do a lot of these stories in each newscast. So I try to break them down into different segments, like different categories. We had a lot of stories about protests that we're going to talk about, stories about the environment or green energy, as well as some tech stories. In our World Situation Report, we've got more news-related stories, including the real story of what happened behind the scenes with the stock market decline, which occurred worldwide. So we're going to tell you what really went down there. There's a lot of changes going on in the Middle East. And we'll also discuss some unnatural frequency disruptors that are being put out right now by the deep state. Nothing too horrible, but we want you guys to learn how to protect yourself against that. Okay, today is August 10th, 2024. Here's the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. Let's kick things off with our field messenger reports. Again, our field messengers are the heart and soul of UNN, and it's really up to you guys. You are the face of news. So we encourage you guys, when you see something happening in your community, report back to us. It doesn't have to be groundbreaking, late-breaking news. This can be stories of what's going on in your community, events, festivals, things like that, because we do want uplifting stories too. Again, this is all about us learning to understand each other more, not having filters and thinking, oh, this country is just about this or this country is just about this. No, we're all human beings and we all love our families and we want to have a good life. So this is a way to get to know each other a little bit better. So on Monday, we have a couple of these reports in each of our newscasts. On Monday, we had two reports. The first one is from Emma in Spain, and she talks about this fig tree that's in her backyard. Now, I love fig. I don't know if you like fig. Whenever I go to the store and I see figs, I'm like, oh, what can I make with figs? So this was a great report for me because Emma showed us not only her fig tree, I believe, in her backyard, but she also discussed the importance of figs as well as their numerous health benefits, and she shows us how to make fig jam. So if that's of interest to you, make sure you check out that report from Monday. Also, we have Ruth, who's reporting from the United States and California. And she talks about her garden. So Ruth is able to grow an abundance of herbs and vegetables in her garden. She calls it more of a Mediterranean type climate where she lives. And she shows us how to get these green leafy vegetables in our diet, which can be dried and then stored as oil. So it's one more way to do that. If you're not in your growing season and you're still trying to get those nutrients, you can store it as various oils. She shows us how to do that so you can eat them all year round. And then on Wednesday, we have Monica from Romania. Monica loves to go around and tell us all the cool places in Romania. I feel like if I ever go to Romania, I'm going to know exactly where to go because of Monica's reports. So she takes us to a clock museum. It's a one-of-a-kind attraction, of course, in Romania, and it has these beautiful clocks. You can see it in the video. These historic timepieces. Some of the clocks are animated. This goes far beyond cuckoo clocks. When I think of animated clocks, that's immediately where my mind goes. But it's a really cool story, so check that out. Also on Wednesday, Danelle from the United States. She's reporting from Salt Lake Lake City. She shows us a summer concert going on in her area. Actually takes place in downtown Salt Lake City. And of course, it's for the whole community to enjoy. We got a taste of some of the live music. There's also dance lessons. I think they had roller skating as well. I'm a big fan of roller skating. I really think we need to bring this back. This is an amazing exercise. When I was a kid, I used to go roller skating all the time, not for its exercise benefits, just because I thought it was super fun. But I really think we need to bring this back. And they're doing it in Salt Lake City. Then on Friday, a couple more reports. Tristan from the United States out of California, she went to this organic family farm. It's called the Mount Olive Organic Farm. And it's called Mount Olive because I believe the first plant that they planted was an olive plant, an olive bush. I'm not sure exactly. Olive tree, I guess it's a tree, right? An olive tree. But they do a lot with farming and really going back to natural farming. So they do practices such as worm composting and using natural fertilizers. And so Tristan interviewed the owner, who showed us, basically gave us a little tour of the place, showed how they do their composting with worms. It's a very interesting story. And then also on Friday, we had a story from Beatrice out of the United States. She's reporting from North Carolina. And this is incredible. You really need to check out this story. She shows us her shade garden. I swear, this has got to be one of the most beautiful gardens that I have seen. It's so pleasant that it almost looks fake. And I mean that in the best way possible, because how did she do this? And because there wasn't a lot of sunlight on it, it kind of gave it this set appearance, like S-E-T, like a movie set. I told our producer, Mike, I was like, oh my gosh, this is so perfect. It looks like it belongs in a movie, some sort of, movie in someone's backyard. It's gorgeous. But her whole story is about how flowers and plants can thrive in the shade, because you think, oh gosh, I don't get a lot of sun, or where I live doesn't have a lot of sun, or maybe it only has sun during certain parts of the year, but you can have these shaded areas that have limited sunlight and grow amazing things, as Beatrice points out. If you guys want to see these Field Messenger reports, if you're not already a member where you can get our newscast as soon as it comes out, I encourage you guys to check out our YouTube and Rumble channels. We do post the news a week after it's released to our members. And you can check these out on the dates that I mentioned as I was going through the stories. Now it's time for the New Earth. Again, this is a portion of the news, which is really my favorite, which is encouraging you guys, getting everybody to think bigger, because I know if you're watching mainstream media or even checking out some stuff on alternative media, it is just gloom and doom. And we are the creators of our own reality. So if you stay in that mindset of gloom and doom, that's what's in store for you. But I want to think about where we're going, because without the deep state and all these people trying to manipulate us and send us negative frequencies and all this horrible stuff that they've been doing for God knows how long, we can really thrive as humanity. And that's what the New Earth is all about. What kind of world do we want to build? And we usually start off this segment of the news with a short interview, 5 to 7 minutes. So let's go through our interviews first, and then I'll share with you some of my favorite uplifting stories over the past week. So for our interviews, we kick things off on Monday with Lindsay Andriotti. Lindsay happens to be a friend of mine, but she also is really big into encouraging people to help restore the planet by encouraging them to lead their best lives, to really figure out what their skills are, and then just go for it. Just do what you love to do. Contribute to society in different ways. And she calls these people imaginals. And Lindsay is also really big on kindness. She has a whole business that's built around kindness, and she gives out a currency. They're called kindness coins. I have several actually in my purse, and I try to pass them out when I see people doing kind things in the world to recognize them for that. And so in this segment, we're talking about ways you can spread kindness to others. Now, if you think about this, you could probably come up with many things on your own. This is just kind of a little brainstorming session, and we talk about the importance of doing this because it is one of those things that is contagious, right? If you spread kindness to someone, odds are you are going to change their day, and maybe they will spread kindness to somebody else. It's the whole pay it forward, but you're doing it with kindness, and it really does start with you. Don't wait for someone to be kind to you for you to be kind to someone else. It starts with you, and we talk about how to do that. Then on Wednesday, we interviewed Will Harris. Oh my goodness, I love Will. Will is part of Green Oak Pastures. I believe he's the owner. He's also a fourth generation cattleman, kind of has an old school approach to stuff. The history behind it is they kind of went to a different way of farming using unnatural pesticides, and then they switched back to the way his, I believe, great-grandfather did things, and is now a huge advocate of regenerative farming. So we've been talking about him, or about regenerative farming with Will, and doing different segments with him. This one focuses on, why don't we have more people, more farmers focusing on regenerative farming? What is holding them back? Because if it's better for our planet, it's better for the animals, it's better for humans, why aren't more people doing this? And a little teaser is, it really boils down to the effort. You got to go against the grain, no pun intended. You have to do things differently than what other people are doing. So that may take more time, more planning. And then it also comes down to not making as much money, right? So Will explains that a little bit more. And then on Friday, we had Seth Dietland on the show. He communicates with angels. And I love talking to Seth. This particular interview is about, what do we do when it seems like the guidance that we were getting from Source, God, the Creator, seems to stop? Because odds are you've had this kind of communication before. Maybe you didn't attribute it to God or the universe or whatever, but you kind of have this little voice encouraging you to do something. And what do you do when that seems to go away? Is it really gone? Are you just transitioning? We talk a lot between transitioning from the third dimension into the fourth, which is a crazy dimension in itself, and ultimately going to the fifth dimension. So is it about this transition that we're making? What's really going on here? So you have to listen to the interview with Seth in order to get that answer. All right, let's go through some of our New Earth stories. So, for this first story, I was a little hesitant on whether or not we should run this, but I'm really glad we did. And it's about a new global trend called divorce registries, and it is gaining in popularity. These platforms offer practical support for those rebuilding their lives from scratch, obviously, as they're in the process of getting a divorce, or maybe their divorce is already final. Friends and family can contribute meaningful items to help them create a new home filled with hope and positivity. It makes it simple and easy for loved ones to give practical gifts without taking sides. Now, I was hesitant on releasing this story because I thought, are we encouraging more people to get divorced? But if you really think about it, this is a man-made principle. This idea of being married, not being married, it is a man-made principle. And we know that there's a lot of money that they make from married couples for tax purposes and things like that. I'm not even going to get into that right now. But I think we're probably going to see more people separating in the near future, just because people are going to recognize who they are. They are going to recognize their past, where they've been. A lot of these things that we've been talking about, past lives, things like that, are going to come to the surface. And they may change a little bit. And this idea of staying with the same person, quote unquote, forever, especially as our lives increase, the amount of time we're here on this planet will be able to increase with, eating healthy food and, staying away from all the pharmaceutical stuff. So are we really expected to stay with the same person forever? I think that's a lot to ask, which is give me a totally different perspective on this story. And of course, we want people to be happy. That's a frequency thing. We've already talked about that during this podcast. If you are putting out negative energy, that is impacting people. I believe it's within a 20-foot radius of your body. This is why people say, oh, so-and-so walked in the room and, just lit up the room. That's a frequency. They are actually impacting you with their attitude, if you will, what they're giving off with their body. And you can do this in a negative or a positive way. Our next story is about the Buena Fortuna Gardens in Mexico. So this is more of an uplifting story. It was created in 1999. It is now a natural, self-sustaining food forest. thriving in a desert that receives less than 2 inches of rain annually and has consistent high temperatures. This environment is now home to more than 3,000 plant species. More than 2,500 of these trees and plants are edible, medicinal, and useful. Planting deep-rooted trees that can survive hot climates provides this lush canopy and habitat for animals in the forest. So it doesn't matter how much rain you get, right? You can have a really low amount of rain and you can create a food forest and not be dependent on all of the mega corporations out there and all the crap that they're, spreading on our food and all of that stuff. You can do it on your own. And our final New Earth story is about a really cool program that's going on in Victoria, Australia. A wildlife rehabilitation program has been set up in a minimum security prison. Inmates care for injured or abandoned native animals, and they are helping in their recovery, and then they release them back into the wild. And this has been going on since 1999, which is incredible. The program has successfully rehabilitated over 100 animals with the assistance of more than 250 prisoners. Inmates, of course, feel a sense of accomplishment from seeing the animals return to the wild, and many continue with wildlife care after their release. I love stories that take a look at a problem that we have on this planet right now, and it provides other solutions. And the prison system is a huge problem that we have. We know that that is a huge moneymaker. And it shouldn't be, right? That there's not a lot of effort put on rehabilitation. And I love that these prisoners are seeing animals that are in need, which you could say that's kind of them. They got themselves into a bad situation. They needed help. And they're helping these animals. And that impacts the prisoners in a positive way. So a great story, and I can't wait to see how the whole prison system starts to change, as well as many other things that need to change on this planet as part of the restoration plan. Let's talk about some regional stories. So as I mentioned earlier, we do a lot of these stories in each newscast. I couldn't possibly give you highlights on everything, so I'm breaking these down into various categories that I saw over the past week. So we've got some stories about protests that are going on around the world, some environmental/green energy stories, and then finally we'll wrap it up with some tech stories. So when it comes to protests, let's start in Bangladesh. So Bangladesh's prime minister has resigned and fled to India as a result of escalating violence and protests, which have left 250 people dead and thousands more injured. The protests initially focused on reservation quotas for government jobs, but then it evolved into demands for the prime minister to resign, coinciding with her controversial election win, which happened earlier this year. The military stepped in, announced plans for an interim government. Nationwide curfews have been imposed, and citizens are now taking to the streets to celebrate this resignation, but they are also still protesting against ongoing violence, vandalism, government, and just government repression in general. In England, recent protests across the country have led to police action, with more than 6,000 riot officers deployed. Shops in cities like Manchester, Birmingham, and Essex were boarded up, and they had to cancel some hearings. These are immigration tribunals. A lot of these hearings had to be canceled because there were threats against their legality. Authorities reported 15 planned events, mostly involving counter-protesters, with fewer gatherings than they originally expected. So far, 428 arrests have been made to help restore order. And we have a protest that erupted in Kenya, actually in the capital of Kenya, as demonstrators called for the president's resignation during the swearing in of a new cabinet. Since the beginning of the protest, which I believe started back in June, more than 50 people have lost their lives due to clashes with police, who have responded with tear gas and roadblocks. Businesses were closed across the city. Public transport was also significantly disrupted. Moving on to environment/green energy stories. We're going to talk about some stuff going on in Brazil. Brazil's environment minister has raised alarms about potential fraud in the carbon credit market that could impact the environment and local communities. Recent police investigations showed criminal enterprises allegedly sold carbon certificates from land stolen in the Amazon. An investigation has led to the arrest and discovery of widespread land misappropriation affecting local communities and their rights to land and resources. In Maryland, we have a story regarding their school system and the implementation of electric buses. It has proven to be costly and inability, but the district has encountered persistent delays and operational setbacks following a $168 million contract for 326 electric buses. Many buses were meant to roll out at the start of the school year, but they were delivered late. And as a result, students and families were negatively impacted by inconsistent transportation. And get this, the district was forced to approve the purchase of 90 diesel buses for more than $14.7 million to cover this shortfall. These electric buses, have also had frequent mechanical issues, leaving them inoperable for extended periods. Residents in Cairo, Egypt are increasingly impacted by the loss of green spaces due to road expansion projects that remove trees and parks. These essential areas, which once helped fight pollution and heat, have significantly decreased, which has led to rising temperatures. Cairo has only a small amount of green space per person. It's actually far below recommended levels, and authorities have plans to plant millions more of trees to help compensate. But there are concerns about replacing established trees and a worrying trend of relocating greenery to wealthy suburbs. The Environmental Protection Agency in the U.S., or the EPA, has issued an emergency order to halt the use of the pesticide dachtal, or it's also known as DCPA. This pesticide is used on crops like strawberries and broccoli and poses serious health risks to pregnant women and their unborn children. Exposure can alter fetal thyroid hormone levels, leading to irreversible health issues such as low birth weight, reduced brain development, and impaired motor skills. The EPA plans to provide a notice within 90 days to permanently cancel all DCPA products. Moving on to tech. Turkish authorities have blocked access to Instagram following accusations of censorship related to the killing of the political leader of Hamas. The country implemented the ban without providing a formal reason or timeline for its duration. Turkey's communication chief criticized what he describes as a suppression of expression. Now, this ban heavily impacts nearly 58 million Instagram users in Turkey as it restricts a popular means of communication. A U.S. federal judge has ruled Google operates an illegal monopoly in the online search market. This outcome may lead to Google dismantling its default search agreements, which could enhance competition from other search engines like Microsoft's Bing, and the impact could provide consumers more choices and possibly better search experiences. Also, advertisers who have been facing high prices in a monopolistic market could benefit from a more competitive landscape, resulting in fairer pricing. And our final regional story is about China. China is launching a new identity verification system that lets users access internet services while reducing personal data sharing with apps. This process involves scanning an ID card and taking a photo, aiming to reduce data leaks and protect users' anonymity while adhering to real name authentication laws. However, there are concerns about government surveillance, of course, and control over online activities, with critics claiming it may disguise increased monitoring. Now it's time for some highlights from our World Situation Report. Of course, this is with Kimberly Gogan from the Office of the Guardian. She comes on the news and she gives us an update of what's happening. Again, we have access to the highest security clearance on this planet. This is how we get this information. Now, Kim talks about stuff that's going on this planet, what the deep state is doing, and then we also talk about things that are happening off planet. This week there was a lot of focus on news related items because the deep state is just going berserk right now. So the first thing that we talked about on Monday is this stock market decline, which happened worldwide. Now, this is part of a plan from the Rothschild family. They have, the deep state isn't very creative, you guys. They run the same programs over and over again. And Rothschild had this plan from a long time ago that they were going to, make the United States broke and buy it back for pennies on the dollar. This is them still trying to do that, but failing miserably. So here's Kim with more information about what happened with that stock market decline.
So there was a conversation that I had back in 2013, and I've mentioned it to you before, if you've been following me for a while, whereas the Rothschild family basically said that they would crash the dollar, crash the world's economy, and then buy everything back for pennies on the dollar. And we've talked about this before because they've attempted this several times. And then, of course, when they don't have the money to complete this task, we go right back to where they started and the markets come back up and there's no problems. This time, this was a little bit different. Was the Order of the Dragon involved? Yes. Were the Rothschild family involved? Yes, they were. So here is the reason why we saw a sharp decline on Friday in the markets and also a decline today somewhat that looks like it's, I guess you would say, somewhat recovering at this point. What we're seeing is a siphon, essentially. On Friday, I talked about the fact that we thought that they got about between $70 to $80 million, which in part was true. The amount of money that was received to get the war in the Middle East started was around that amount. And that was the amount that was actually released to the military and to other folks to get, the arms dealers and so on and so forth. But the total amount from all global markets worldwide was somewhere around $2.9 trillion. Now, unfortunately for these people, they never learn. So they took this 2.9 trillion, put it into an off-ledger account, and began trading against that 2.9 trillion, not really sure what they were trading, probably government bonds, loads of promises and zero delivery. They used it as flash cash over the weekend to get some of these groups in the Middle East that are participating in this show to start, firing rockets and this and that over the weekend. And it's gone kind of up and down. But at the end of the day, they couldn't get the money back into the system. So there were about 3 or 4 facilities within the U.S., most of them with inside mountains. So you would consider them latent facilities that they tried to revive during Lionsgate. And they were pretty much around the main point of Lionsgate, which would have been in Yellowstone Park. And we talked about the Oracle and why that was a main point in the world last week. So they siphoned it into these facilities, began creating numbers for money, which is not currency. And they ended up ramping up these fictitious numbers to somewhere around $880 trillion. Now, they couldn't get it back into the system. That's the problem. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, about the economic hierarchy of the world, because I think it's important for everybody to understand when I say things don't work, why they don't work, and why there is only one way to fix this. So by Sunday, they started calling, of course, through a contact that they have of mine, never me directly, of course. And they started calling and asking for a meeting, asking for help. Then when we said, no, we can't help you, we won't help you, they came back and went and tried some more hacking to see if they could get some more money from somewhere. Of course, there's no trading on the weekends except for FX which is currency trading for a short period of time. And then they would come back an hour or two later after they failed, and then they would go back and then ask again, and we would say no, and then they'd go back and try something else, and then that wouldn't work out. Then they'd come back. This happened probably about 8 or 9 times all day long on Sunday, yesterday. Now, why can't we help them? Number one, it is abundantly clear that they really do not understand macro and microeconomics on any level. Number two, they obviously don't learn from their previous mistakes, because this has been going on for probably about 5 or 6 years now, where ever since the advent of the key integrated monetary system, they haven't figured out that once they take it out of the system and put it into any kind of an off-ledger server or remote server, why they can't get this quote-unquote money back into the system. And that problem is even worse now than it ever was with the advent of currency versus money or credits. They want me, I know what they want from me, they would like me to put allocation numbers to their money, this $880 trillion, so that it's not all dollars, by the way, it's various other currencies around the world. You had RMB in the pool, you also had rubles in the pool, and so on and so forth. And a lot of promises made to these respective countries should they be successful. Yeah. Well, that didn't quite work out. We did find the International Treasury Transfer Reserve System, which is an old system that was tied to the Plunge Protection Committee, not only for U.S. market plunges, but also for deep drops in other markets in the world as well, like UK and everywhere there's a treasury, which is every country in the world. And that's how they were siphoning it out the back door. In addition to that, they had all of their players in the game, such as Buffett and Soros, I call these bagmen, Rockefellers and other large hedge funds, BlackRock, all in on it as well. Therefore, there was a large sell-off, and there continues to be a significant increase in sell-offs. The market's been down anywhere between 1,200 to around 950, 960 today. They continue to try to repeat today, in cooperation with all of their bagmen, the same thing they did on Friday, because somehow all of that fictitious money evaporated over the weekend, probably within 24 hours of this game and this scam, including the money that they siphoned out of the market. So there's another almost 3 trillion US dollar equivalent in various currencies that has left the banking system as liquidity. Now, I know this sounds a little bit scary, but it's not really at this moment. The lack of liquidity in the banking system and the fall in the markets is a positive for humanity as a whole. I know everybody's hitting the panic button and it's all over alternative media. We're all going to die. Insert Nasara Jasara, and now it's Trump Sara is out there. But none of those things are actually the case. What will happen in the future is it will allow us regular humans, not me per se, but regular humans, to actually acquire some of these large corporations, larger hedge funds, and start running them right once they all go bankrupt. So if they continue to try to crash the market, it's only going to help us in the long run recover faster. Think about how we could change the world if we could acquire some of these large corporations for literally pennies on the dollar or currency, actually spendable, usable cash in a banking system.
Now, I want to break that down for you guys just a little bit, because you may have missed a portion of the news where we talk about the difference between money and currency. A lot of people think that's the same thing, and it really was for a while, I guess, but it's not anymore. So money is what we used to use in a system that was dark. Okay, that's the easiest way to explain it. It was never for our benefit. It was always run on credits. as opposed to you just getting pure currency from source God, the creator. And that is what we mean when we say currency. It is an energy current direct from the creator. We've talked about this in different newscasts, but I wanted to explain that because Kim, the way she said that kind of at the end of that soundbite, there's a difference now between money and currency. And the deep state is trying to get old money sent through a new system that doesn't recognize money anymore. It is just recognized currency, which again is a direct current from source God, the creator. I really do encourage you guys to go back and watch Monday's World Situation Report, because the second part of what Kim talks about is kind of what I just said, but a much more drawn out version. And it's great for not only us to hear again, to really understand money now versus currency, but the history of it, which I'm going to tell you now gets into other beings running this planet. So if you're not quite ready for that, maybe watch it and just let it linger, process a little bit, because I mean, that is the truth. A lot of people have a hard time thinking about ETs and other beings running this planet, but that was the truth for a very, very long time. But it's really good for us to hear that, and you can also share that with other people. So I would really encourage you guys, go back, listen to the World Situation Report, specifically from Monday, which was August 5th. So go check that out. And then on Wednesday, I was actually able to join Kim live. You know, our schedules haven't quite aligned recently, so Kim's been doing the World Situation Report on her own, but we were live together on Wednesday, and we talked about a lot of things, you know, what's the deep state up to, all of that, but I really wanted to focus in on changes happening in the Middle East. To no surprise to any of you guys listening to this, but there's a lot of disinformation out there, and we really just want to set the record straight on what's happening.
Some things are changing rapidly in the Middle East. Some of the higher ranking members of groups like the Hamas and others have figured out that the objectives of the group, as was told to them, meaning it's a religious fight, it's a fight for our people, you know, all of those kinds of things, it has come to their attention that that is actually not the case, and that is not what they're doing right now, or what they're going to be doing or attempting to do. And it became very clear to some folks that thought that they were really doing the right thing by their people. And these are very high-ranking members who have decided to walk away from the group. Mm-hmm. They said, that's not what I'm doing. I'm not doing that. You know, I'm not getting involved. I'm not bombing, you know, our people or other people for, you know, political benefits and those kinds of things.
Was that a larger group of people, Kim, that walked away?
Well, yeah, I'd say it's a trickle right now. There's been, you know, about 4 or 5 different folks that are high-ranking in different groups throughout the Middle East that really truly feel like they were fighting for a cause. They're fighting for their people. They're fighting against Israel. They're fighting against the Khazarian mafia that runs Israel. They're fighting against the Rothschilds. They're fighting against the tyranny. They're, you know, that's what they believe they're doing, you know, for the freedom of their people. And it's becoming abundantly clear that that is not the case. Part of the reason why it's becoming abundantly clear that it's not the case is because you have Duck Dynasty trying to run operations in the Middle East. They're not even, their ego is so big, they could care less about keeping up the narrative to keep the people fighting. And I'm not saying we want to keep them fighting, but, you know, from our standpoint, we want peace, right? We want everybody to be sovereign. We want the countries to thrive on their own, whether that's in the Middle East or in the U.S. or anywhere else. You know, and the only way that's really going to happen is if the more powerful groups throughout the Middle East start to realize this is not what you think it is. You know, freedom cannot be achieved in this way. Bombing one country, you know, using weapons to bomb one country to incite them into war, you know, and then in return they fire back at you does not earn you freedom. It earns you death.
Yeah.
There has to be a different way and a different structure. And unfortunately, for a few centuries, they don't know any different. Mm-hmm. Are they willing to learn a new structure? It's no different than in the US. All of politics in the world, whether you're in the Middle East, you're in Russia, you're in China, you're in Armenia, you're anywhere else in the world, is all run by the same tyrannical groups. The problem is their brains of the operation are no longer there. Therefore, they're all running around in circles, and now you're down to Duck Dynasty. And if you're new here, I call them the Duck Dynasty, based on the television series from a few years back, where people just run around haphazardly, doing crazy things. And except this time, they're doing it with governments, and they're doing it with what we would consider terrorist threat groups, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. As far as in the news regarding the Middle East, there is a lot of talk about bombings that didn't actually happen. There is old footage floating around in the last 24 hours. They're talking about apparently the Americans are attacking Yemen. We haven't seen physically, eyes on, boots on the ground, a lot of that happening. It seems to be a lot of hype. There is some interesting information that has come to light too in the last couple of days about that. A member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff stated that they will not pull out of the Middle East. This is good cop, bad cop. This person's like, well, I don't agree with the rest of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but, I'm overruled. Oh, baloney, 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 baloney. They are all in on it. The statement was actually made that we, and by we, they're not talking about the United States government, we must gain full control of that region. Now, reasons to take full control over the region. Because a comment was made back about, is this about the gate? Is this about the Lion's Gate? And he goes, yeah, we know about that too. So I think they believe, and this is what happens when Duck Dynasty tries to run your day. I think that they believe that if they can control all of the countries in that region, or more specifically Iran and Iraq, that potentially they could gain control of the gate. Yeah. They don't really understand what that means and what control of the gate actually means, and why that would make a difference if they did, because we're going to talk about Lion's Gate a little bit more here in a minute too. But taking control of the Middle Eastern region is not going to give them control over the gate. In any way, shape, or form. Not this one, not the one over in Yellowstone, not anywhere else. So that's kind of a flawed model, but that's what happens when Duck Dynasty is your leaders. Number two, they are under the impression if they gain control of the Middle East, Gaza Strip, and other areas, that they will be able to leverage the in-ground assets in the region, such as in-ground oil, gas, possibly some gold, those types of things that are present in the region. Is that the case? No. They will never enter those assets into a financial system, because I have the liens on anything from that region for the next 100 years, to the tune of about 2.1 quadrillion has come out to fund various things in the Middle East over the years. And it was actually you, the military, maybe not you with the Joint Chiefs of Staff now. You probably haven't been there for 100 years, although it feels that way. But others, planted their ghost flags in the region, be it Desert Storm in Saudi Arabia or other locations throughout the years. I mean, and you can even go back 1,100 years or 1,000 years or whatever, and you can still look at times that you have transferred liens over to the Alpha system, which is now Golden Age. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's about 2.1 quad at this moment in time that you would owe me to release those liens. Now, for those of you that don't know, and maybe you haven't been following for a while, oil and natural gas are nothing but bacteria excrement
Yeah.
how do I say, bacteria gas. You know, you get gas if you eat the wrong foods or something. It's the same gas that bacteria excretes, and that is based on their consumption of fossils and whatever, or carbon-based materials, and then they excrete this stuff we now refine and put in our cars.
Lovely.
I know. Isn't that funny?
Yes. And everyone's fighting over it. So just think about that.
Yeah. So since there is no shortage of bacteria that perform this function naturally, there is definitely no shortage of oil or gas in the world. And it is a regenerating resource. Now, for that reason, based on the rate of regeneration in the region, we even hold everything that the bacteria could produce for the next 100 years. So there is not a whole lot these people are going to achieve from doing this, first of all. Second of all, I learned this over a decade ago when I ran up against Nancy Pelosi with a $14 trillion contract she was waving in the face of, at that time, Blackwater, now called Frontier or whatever it's called, and other military groups, private military groups, that they could earn up to $14 trillion if they could manage to take over the region. Now, that same contract is floating all around the Pentagon as well. And we could get $14 trillion, they think. Now, they don't understand economics, so they don't understand where that money could come from, possibly. And then they could trade that money, and they could then own the United States. Absolutely not. But that's the plan, because these are big numbers for them. They don't really understand finance. They don't understand that they could use this money for a world war anyway. And number one. Number two, I hold all the liens on that, so they won't be able to factor against that oil in any currency anywhere, or Bitcoin or any other coin for that matter. So just the pure and simple fact that we heard those comments coming from a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff who said, we must own. Who is we?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they're talking about global headquarters, maybe SSP people, those kinds of things. They're probably still talking about the rotten children whose memory is short. They forgot that they turned over all the liens. And if they go through their Department of Defense records from the past, just a few decades ago, they'll see all the liens that we acquired even in the 90s, in the 80s and 90s and late 90s and early 2000s throughout the Middle East. So you're kind of wasting your time.
I feel like that is the MO of the deep state, just doing things that are wasting their time. And it continued with Friday's report. Kim told us about some things that were happening that you may or may not have seen through mainstream media. There was a huge port explosion in China. There was a mega quake warning out of Japan, which is what triggered the tsunami all those years ago. These are attempts to make events happen through non-existent alien technology. So did this technology exist at one time? Yes, it did. It no longer works because it is no longer tied to the Omega system. That was what all of this, dark matter, negative things happening on our planet, it was all a result coming from the Omega system. So you take down their main system, none of this other technology works because it was connected to the main system. We also have reports the deep state is trying to bring back Al Qaeda. I mean, these people just do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. They are literally repeating events from the early 90s and 2000 in their prep for World War III, which they are having a really hard time getting off the ground because nobody has any money. But that didn't stop them from taking pallets of cash, flying around in their planes, and trying to get people to buy into this, give me weapons and, let's start a war together whole scam. There was also a scam out of Santander Bank in Mexico that Kim goes into more detail about. They did this transfer of about $1 million. The plan was to transfer billions more. All of this money was tied to the president of Mexico as well as former U.S. Vice President Mike Pence. So if anyone thinks that Mike Pence is still a good guy, know that he got this money, all of this money in this account as a result of being tied to human trafficking. Not a good guy. So he would get a cut, as well as the Mexican president would get a cut. I think it was 10% of the money that was earned from these transactions across the U.S.-Mexico border. Billions and billions of dollars in this account that the deep state thought that they could use, because if you don't already know, whatever is playing Mike Pence is not actually Mike Pence. Okay, so he's not around to actually cash this money or use it in any capacity, but the deep state thought that they could use it for World War III. That did not turn out in their favor, and they no longer have access to any of that money. But I'm kind of tired of talking about the deep state. Do you guys ever feel that way? It's like, oh my gosh, how many times can these hamsters go round and around in their wheel? So let's talk about something that you have control over. And this is a soundbite that I want to play. The deep state is trying to send out some negative frequencies. Really, they're playing with Legos at this point. Any kind of alien technology they used to have a connection to, they no longer have. So if you're starting to feel a little weird, like you've got a 10-minute cold or something, just really weird things happening, then it's probably a result of these weird frequencies, but they can't sustain these frequencies. In fact, Kim said there were 432 locations that she found so far putting out these frequencies, and I'm sure it's more by this time. But the soundbite that I want to play is about how to put up a shield to protect yourself, essentially, from these negative frequencies. And I also want to give you a heads up. Apparently, the deep state or whoever is monitoring our newscast, which they do all the time, there's a lot of disruption in the soundbite that I'm about to play. It's like they didn't want Kim to give out this information at all. So if it sounds a little bit choppy, sorry about that. That's just their way of trying to, shield humanity from the truth. But here's more information with Kim about how to shield yourself from these negative frequencies.
They have been putting an extra concerted effort, though, and I will say this, on sending out a lot of negative frequencies, whether that is through regular military equipment, SSP equipment. They have been focused on really, really sending out these dark frequencies to humans. Frequencies even like weird disease, that kind of thing we've seen a lot of. Home of the 10-minute cold, that kind of thing. You feel terrible for a couple of hours, and all of a sudden you feel better, and whatever illness you thought you had just miraculously goes away. So I will say this, until we find every last place on this planet, and so far we're up to 432 of them as of today, where they were sending different frequencies from. So until we locate every single place on this planet, I would suggest you take notice. If you start feeling anxious is one thing. If you feel like you are having an abnormal histamine response, like an allergy to something, like if you don't normally have summertime or wintertime allergies, depending on where you are in the world, and you feel like you're sneezing, like what is making me sneeze, that kind of thing, and then you start feeling like you feel sick, I would ask you to take a few moments to breathe through it, put up your own frequency shield. Amplify that shield by doing something that makes you happy. It might be listening to music, playing with your kids or grandkids or whoever that is, and really ramp up that frequency in your person and then see if it goes away. If it goes away, then you will know that this is not a physical cold, allergy, and illness. You will know that this is a frequency that is coming out against humans. Remember, these people would like us all dead and off this planet if they had their way, because they would like to control the collective consciousness of only dark folks, aka them and their brood, so to speak. So be ever mindful this weekend. We're going as fast as we can on our front. Feel free to recognize where you think it might be coming from. If you have those types of skills and you'd like to stop the machine from sending out the frequencies, if you can find it, then feel free to do that too. If it happen to be people around you, hey, you don't need to have those people. They're coming after us. You have the right to defend your life and the life of an innocent, always, even under source law. So keep that in mind. You are not as powerless as you think. Remember how powerful you are, and that you can stand up for yourself, and you can fight frequencies. You can fight all of these things that are going on in this world. You have the power to do that. You have source on your side. You have that more and more every single day of a direct connection, and you have the ability to fix it. So don't think just because I'm saying, look, this is what's happening right now, that you don't have the ability to defend yourself. Because I have shown several people how to do that over the course of the last couple of weeks. And it keeps it from manifesting itself into a physical illness that is something nobody wants. So that's what we're seeing going on, around the world.
All right, so now you guys know how to protect yourself. There's a lot more information that Kim went over about what specifically the deep state is doing and where they're doing it. But if you want those details, I do suggest that you either watch the newscast a week later after it's released, again, on our YouTube and Rumble channels, or if you want it right away, just become a member. I think it's less than $10 a month. Very reasonable. You can get more information about that at unitednetwork.earth. That gives you access to all of our UNN newscasts, again, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, the complete world situation reports, as well as some of our original series. And you can also follow us on social media. So if you go to that same website, scroll down to the bottom, all of our links are there. If you want to share our content, we do have a social media team that promotes clips as, they come about in the news, and that's a great way to share UNN. Of course, you can always share this podcast as well. So this is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News. Thanks for being with us, and I'm signing off.